Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Livingston of Want Leverage Communications, the public relations and thought leadership agency, and I'm delighted to be with you here again for another episode of PR Patter. If you like what you see, go to my website at wantleverage.com and download my new free tip sheet, Unlock the 5 Hidden LinkedIn Strategies That Top PR Teams Swear By. It's got some great tips and tricks that I know you'll be able to apply to your public relations and LinkedIn marketing immediately. I am delighted to bring on my guest today, Brian Lowe. He is, and I love his bio, a media relations nerd, sole proprietor, news junkie, music obsessive, and frustrated but hopeful New York Giants season ticket holder. Brian was raised in the big agency world of consumer PR, cutting his teeth working on iconic category leaders like Disney, Oreo, Campbell Soup, Progressive Insurance, and Verizon. Wow. In 2006, he launched BML Public Relations with a $300 press release project and has grown the agency into an award-winning PR agency representing notable brands across franchising, restaurant and hospitality, food and beverage, sports, experiential and touring entertainment, retail, travel and tourism, and home and building products. He was named PR Professional of the Year by PRSA New Jersey, and Brian is also the creative force behind some of the most viral campaigns in recent history, and we'll be talking about the art of the PR stunt today. He's credited with inventing the pizzacchini. I gotta love it. It's great. The gender reveal lasagna. Oh my God. And edible cheeseware. You have fun at work, Brian.
I don't want to work for a living. Let's have some fun.
He also holds world records for the loudest moo and the largest mug of hot chocolate. All right. Well, I'm thrilled that you're here today, Brian. It's setting my day up to be great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's talk about the art of the PR stunt. It's something I haven't chatted about before, but I've been involved in a number of them throughout my career. And first, let's talk about the changing media landscape, because I think this has had a big impact on PR stunts. Well, first of all, explain what a PR stunt is, and then,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So PR stunts are just, they're designed, we refer to them more internally as of late as brand splashes, right? So just a way to get people's attention, P.T. Barnum style, that is, people have been doing for a really long time. So really just trying to get to generate attention that also ties back to your brand, to your message, to what you're trying to communicate to the audience that you're looking to reach. And, they typically are either humorous or insightful or incredibly visual in nature. So they're a lot of fun. And the best part about them is the fact that, look, sometimes you might require a big check for them. But from a creative standpoint, I think the more creative you are, it typically lends itself to that's what gets you around the hurdle of maybe, budget restrictions and things like that. So, back in the day when I worked at some of those brands you mentioned earlier, when I supported those brands, it was one of those things where we could get blank checks.
Not like that anymore.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore. So creativity and PR stunts are a huge way to insert yourself, quickly in the media landscape and get some eyeballs, get some attention, hopefully reinforce your brand messaging, drive some traffic or some sales. And keep your name out there.
Great. So how has the media landscape changed, though?
Yeah. So as you know, as a PR person, right, it's crazy these days. So, the landscape has evolved tremendously, even just since the pandemic. And of course, politics and doom and gloom are the things that seem to be gobbling up the majority of the media landscape. So prior to COVID, creative was, a beast. It was one of those things where, and I think of some of the best in the industry, the Taco Bells, the KFCs, those are the types of brands that really do some incredible and thought-provoking PR stunts. But prior to COVID, that stuff would hit news feeds and it would go globally viral. And it doesn't really seem to be doing that on the national landscape anymore.
Really?
But what we're seeing is that while there's less real estate in the landscape, the creative approach still is now more important than ever. So it doesn't travel on the national landscape the way it used to, but at local levels, it seems to still to really work well in local market media outlets. So for us, I think that even though COVID has reshaped the landscape a little bit, the creative approach and stunts and quick brand splashes are certainly something that should be in your strategy to try and execute 2 to 3 times a year if you can. They really will carry far or perform well for you, I think.
So Simon Sinek always says, start with your why.
Yeah.
Everybody should read that book if they haven't.
Absolutely.
But tell us how that is sort of the beginning of the process of identifying and developing a PR stunt.
Well, so there's a number of things, right? So start with the end in mind. Where are you hoping to be? I think most importantly, right? So that's one of the first things you need to figure out. You need to figure out, is this something that if you say it's the Today Show, is this the type of the thing that the Today Show typically covers? So you want to strategically start thinking about some of those things, but really take a step back and say, what am I looking to communicate, right? What is that message? And is the purpose of this to launch a product? Is it just shift perception? Or like I mentioned earlier, brand splashes, is it just to grab attention? So you always need to engineer these stunts to make sure that also they're a fit for your brand. Again, whether it's super creative or thought-provoking, whatever it is, you need to make sure it aligns with your brand's core values. You want to make sure that it's, you've got campaign goals and messaging that are going to show a tangible result at the end of it, right? So I think that analyzing that why is important. And then the best thing about creative stunts is that they can be scaled and shaped to fit whatever you're looking to accomplish.
If it's a solid enough concept.
Right? Yes, it's a solid enough concept. So yeah, and the problem is it's hard to sit here and say, hey, here are all the boxes that you need to kind of engineer and check because it varies per concept, per product, per service. But when you land on good creative, look, I'm a big believer in typically you can ask a number of my buddies in general, right? When I come to them, I go, listen, I got this great idea. What do you think of this? And if they laugh, based on the nature of the types of clients we represent, if they laugh, I'm like, it works. It works. Humor is another great thing to really, so create a little bit of a litmus test as well. There are some, you want to be able to analyze it and poke holes in it, but also you need to also think of it from a 360-degree angle to make sure that you're not doing something on one side that's going to create chaos on the other. But importantly, it's important to really understand what are you trying to accomplish? That'll help you be able to build a model of a stunt that will work well. And then from there, I think it's a natural progression into knowing your audience, right? And I think that when you're trying to figure out, who do you want to communicate to, you really try to have to have your head around specific demographics. Who are the influencers we're trying to reach with this? Or is it just general everyday consumers? One of the big things that I've talked about quite a bit over the years since it happened was the Colin Kaepernick Nike campaign. Right. I mean, if there's anyone who truly believes that Nike was flying blind on that, I've got a bridge to sell you. They knew who they'd lose, but most importantly, they knew who they'd win. Yeah. And so, now granted, not everybody has access to that kind of data and those kinds of metrics, but realistically, you need to kind of look at across the board, any market research, any patterns and behavior of your customer or your target audience, and just do your best to use as many of those metrics as possible to make sure that you're doing something that's going to appeal to them and certainly not alienate anybody.
And what about finding the hook? I mean, you've come up with such creative ideas. How does that happen?
So finding the hook, from our standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, right? Humor, to me, humor works. And here's one of the other things that, and it's funny because sometimes people will say, if they're a bank, they might say, we're not funny. But that's what actually turns it on its head, right? That would be kind of a curveball for people. So
unexpected.
so unexpected. And not to mention, humor is also scalable, right? You can be crazy over the top, or you can just kind of do something that gets a little like something cute and fun and light. That
I
gets
mean, look at Progressive, right? They've turned insurance couldn't be more of a boring topic, right? But they've made it really fun and interesting, and they've developed all these great characters.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I say typically, whether it's to my team or whether I'm boring other people with my thoughts, I will say that, one of the things I would say is like, look, if I had 100 people in a room and I walked in it and 50% of the people looked miserable and 50% of the people looked like they were having a blast, which side of the room would you naturally migrate towards? The people having fun. You know what I mean? So I think that brand marketers these days have either they're nervous or they're scared or they're afraid to alienate a specific group or audience. So to me, it's one of those things where I think it's important to be able to use fun and harness that and really just have a good time. And that's the thing that really, I think, connects with consumers. I think consumers really, especially in a post-COVID world, all those brands that I mentioned earlier, the Taco Bells, the KFCs, the McDonald's, all those guys, they used to have tons and tons of fun. And they do it not because they're just fun, but because it resonates. It will drive. So I always feel like finding the hook, humor is a huge part of it.
Well, you want people, I mean, I think part of the whole PR stunt thing is to get people talking about it, right? You want it to kind of blend into the national or local conversation.
Absolutely. So we did a stunt years ago before the pandemic. I want to say this was like probably 2018. The pumpkin spicing of America was out of control at that point, right? Like it was really kind of nuts. But we caught for a client that was a pizza brand. We ended up launching a pumpkin spice pizza where all we did was we got that Libby's pumpkin pie filler and we're like, go put this on crust. And we sent one can to 200 locations, like one can each to 200 locations, and said, make as many pizzas out of this thing as you can for one day. But the idea was that was a stunt that we designed just to get people talking. And not necessarily, they didn't have to like the pumpkin spice pizza. And one of the funniest TV segments that we had was a morning show in Dallas, in the Dallas market. And the anchors are sitting there and they're all like, oh, let's try it. We did a food drop. They're trying the pumpkin spice pizza. They bite into it. Two of the guys were like, hey, this is pretty good. This is like a dessert pizza. The female anchor bit into the slice and spit it back in her hand and went, nope. And the client called me freaking out. And I was like, she's like, oh my God. I go, you're forgetting. Remember, it's not about them. They didn't have to like it. Yeah. They had to be talking about it.
Right.
And it was we saw it spill into the social universe too, and saw everybody fighting. Oh, what we learned was you really can't mess with pizza. People don't really care for that.
Right.
But it went viral, and it was crazy, and it was fun, and it was light. And although there were people disagreeing about it, it was lighthearted in nature, and it delivered all of our messaging about fresh made dough and all sorts of other things that brand was looking to communicate.
So Brian, I have to ask you because I watched the Emmy Awards the other night. Did you watch it?
I only watched the highlights. I was traveling a little bit this week.
So I would love. I don't know if you heard about what Nate Bargatze, the host, did with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
Oh, I didn't see that. No.
Okay, well, we'll have to talk another time about it, but I'll just mention that what he did was really interesting, and I'm not sure if it was successful or not.
Okay.
But what he did was he said that he would give $100,000 to the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Everybody was clapping. That's great. At the end of the show, he said he would do that. I mean, at the beginning of the show, he set it up. And then he said, but for every guest, for every winner who goes over 45 seconds in their acceptance speech, we'll delete $1,000. So throughout the show, so I thought it was kind of a brilliant idea. And it really, in terms of the charity, I thought, wow, it's kind of putting this charity kind of front and center of this show and getting people to talk about it. So the numbers went up and down and up and down. And at the end, he said, I'm actually giving $350,000 to Boys and Girls Clubs, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of the reviews of the Emmy Awards really said that, it was a negative thing, that
how could that be negative, right? I mean, first of all, he promised an amount that he, more than doubled. I mean, that's how we structure a lot of things as we engineer these things, right? Like back in the day when I used to work at Campbell Soup, we had a guy who was our spokesperson, the commissioner of tailgating, this guy, Joe Kahn. And he was in an RV and he traveled to every NFL stadium during the week, but also went to a Division One college football game and then the Monday night game. So this guy was on the road, and for every mile he traveled throughout the season, we would donate a can of Campbell's Chunky Chili at the time was the product to local area food banks. So being able to engineer, I mean, I love, first of all, Nate Bargatze is hilarious, and he's a clean comic, so he appeals to everybody.
Yeah.
I think it's a win because he put the brand in Boys and Girls Clubs on the national stage. He did.
That's what I thought. Even though people might not have liked the rolling amount of money, but at the end it all worked out. And I think that I would imagine, and I'd love to see the statistics, like how many people gave themselves to Boys and Girls Clubs after the show because it was on the tip of their tongue.
You would think that would be a natural announcement. Yeah. Like if and we work with them through some clients, and not on regional levels, not on necessarily the national level, but if I was running communications for those guys, that would be the thing. It would be, okay, great. At the end of this week, beginning of next week, I would announce the totals that not only Nate Bargatze donated, but that everything else that yielded it as a result. Everything else.
I mean, how many charities have the opportunity to be mentioned during a primetime broadcast throughout the entire show?
The publicity value on that alone is got to be incredible with that kind of viewership and global viewership too. I mean, so that's really incredible stuff. But it's so in line with on brand for who he is as well.
Yeah, I have to read more about it. Anyway, let's talk about getting granular and when you're planning a PR stunt, how it has to really look and feel a certain way.
Yeah, well, one other thing I would say before we even dive into that is just right now, stay away from politics. And the reason why, look, we've done some things where we've poked fun at, some people in the political world without taking a shot necessarily at whatever administration is in office. We've capitalized on some more of the silly things that some of those guys have done. But realistically, the climate is just too hot for that right now. And the other thing is everybody's money is green. So like when we started, so listen, there are obviously cause-based and politically aligned organizations. And if that's part of your mission and the organization of the product or the service, then it makes sense. But generally, I would say it's a little too hot right now to be capitalizing on some of that kind of stuff. So, when we talk about doing a stunt that is creative or fun or is going to generate impact, again, those are the ones where your risk of shooting yourself in the foot is highest. So instead of walking through that minefield, you're probably best to take a pass on it. So that's just friendly advice. Anyone who wants to talk about a concept like that, feel free to call me and I will talk it through and tell you, maybe no.
Right.
Hey, yeah, you know what? Maybe you'll be able to navigate because you can thread the needle on them sometimes. But generally, right now, I think it's a little hot. But as far as stunts are concerned, your question about getting granular, I think that, look, they want to appear spontaneous. I think that's a big thing. And although we want them to appear spontaneous, that doesn't mean that we're not very, very tightly choreographed behind the scenes, because you have to make sure that, again, one of the first things we do, we come up with a great concept when it just feels right in our gut.
Yeah.
Then we start poking holes, right? So how do because we need to make sure, looking at it from a bunch of different angles and poking holes, we need to make sure that we're not either, first of all, that the concept stands up. And second of all, again, we're not about to shoot ourselves in the foot. So, but you want it to look spontaneous and fun. And that's where I think, that's the challenge sometimes. I also think that, depending on what you're doing, make sure that you're clearing it. If you're doing something on site somewhere, like for instance, New York City, you have to be careful. So major cities, you have to be careful to not just show up somewhere and do something. You might need permits. You might get fined. There's a lot of different. So make sure that you're understanding that side of it. And of course, safety. But the other thing related to stunts that we typically do is we try to make sure that, especially if there's a freebie or some kind of consumer incentive involved, that we're really trying to control redemption. The point of PR is to certainly, is to generate awareness, which hopefully leads to sales or trial. But we also need to make sure if there's a freebie or something of that nature online, that we're not We're not doing what Red Lobster did when they did that unlimited, shrimp meal where the company almost went out of business because they were on the hook. So being smart about controlling ways to either, you have official rules or you have limitations. We love doing stunts with people's names. So like if your last name is Burger, right? So on National Hamburger Day, anybody with the name Burger gets a free burger
That's
that
really
day.
cute.
Like
Yeah, that's fun.
valid ID, one day only. Sometimes you build in hourly redemption windows. So
have that all set up beforehand.
Yeah, have all that set up and really think through those things, because those are the things that can make a difference between, making money or losing money. And the reality too is that a lot of times those offers are engineered to make sure that, it's going to get somebody through the door and they're going to get this freebie at a low, for instance, a low food cost. Okay, but I'm here, I'm going to get a soda, I'm going to get a side, I'm going to get something else. So chances are you're making money, you're not really losing money. So yeah, making sure you get granular on all those things: rules, permits, redemption controls, any other limitations. You really need to bake those things in clearly.
What about visuals? Because so much of this has to do with the visual pop and how you attract people to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So visuals to me, funny, light, compelling, outrageous. I mean, those are all the things that you're really vying for. But what I would say is, that old adage of keep it simple. Sometimes I think that people try to pack too many messages in sometimes, or too much of a visual, or too, just over the top stuff. And what happens typically there is it starts to muddy the waters and the messages don't get relayed as clearly as possible. So, so make sure you're keeping it simple. If I can't explain it to you in one sentence, it's too complicated.
It's not, yeah.
So definitely keep it simple, but make it photogenic, make it meme worthy, make it something that would be so easily shared on social media or Instagrammable, photos that people would share. I also think, one of the other things that we also do when we talk about especially keeping it simple is, if you have media friendlies, assuming you're a PR person, right? If you have people in the media that that you can bounce it off of, we do that all the time. We'll call a friend and say, hey, listen, we've got this nuts idea. Like, what do you think? And they're like, hey, well, it might be a little too commercial for us. Or hey, I love it. Like, can we do it first? So establishing, being able to lean on those relationships can be very helpful. And especially when we've got something that maybe runs too close to the edge of, are we going to alienate anybody? Like, what do you think on that? Right. So it's important to always check
it out first. Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course, look, the aftermath, right? Prepare for the aftermath. I think that's an important part too. And so that's making sure that you're monitoring social media, you're monitoring media coverage. You're not, once the coverage starts rolling in, you're not just going, hey, look, we're in this. So read it carefully, make sure the facts are all right, see how things are reported. Different outlets are obviously have different priorities, and all of their priorities are clicks and ratings at this point, right? So you want to make sure that you're just making sure you're monitoring and analyzing how the coverage is coming across, but be ready to respond, especially on the social media side. People talk about PR all the time as, or social media rather, as, oh, social media. Well, social media is just another vehicle, and it's a great vehicle, don't get me wrong, but it all needs to run through the PR lens. Because it's also delivering messaging, right? Sure. And you want to make sure that what you're communicating to the media and what you're communicating to social are not two different tones and voices and all that. We need unification across the board. But I would say, be ready to analyze what people are saying on social about it. Be ready to do community management, respond to some of those people. I think that, and especially if it's a playful way. If people take the time to engage you in a fun and light way because they think it's funny and they're kind of telling you, hey, this hit with me, you have to do so. You have to show them the love, I think. And it's tough. It's a lot of work, but you should do that. And then, look, worst case scenario, be ready with a media statement just in case you do shoot yourself in the foot. And those are only.
There is a certain amount of risk in this.
There is absolutely risk in it, and at least try to anticipate the questions or anticipate where you think somebody could potentially be upset. But the reality is that doesn't mean you necessarily change course, right? Align on, you have to commit to it, right? You have to commit to it, but be ready and listen, even if you don't have everything prepared in advance, to just respond with reactively, just make sure that you're keeping tabs on everything, and know your line of when you feel like you really need to engage versus just kind of don't be so knee jerk. We have a great client who would come to us when sometimes things would bubble up on social media, which wasn't necessarily related to any PR stunt. But something started getting shared. She stayed cool, calm, and collected until it reached a certain number, and then she would pounce. But then, so know your threshold for where you feel like you need to yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But other than that, have fun with it. You're gonna generate more interest from people when you look like you're having a good time. At least that's always been my philosophy. If there are brand marketers watching this, it's time to get fun back. We did a survey back in 2013 of what consumers wanted, and consumers used to love the fun that brand marketers would have. Media has been a little hard, like I said, on the national landscape of covering it to the degree that they used to, but it's working on the local level. And I think that in a time where things are so heavy,
people need a break.
This is the levity we need. Even if it's a 20-second, like I said, you're reading something, you're scrolling, you see something, and you giggle for a second. That's a win in my book.
It's worth it. That's great. Well, This has been such a fun conversation, Brian. Thank you so much for joining me today on PR Patter. I really appreciate your time and your insights. And everyone else, please go to my website at wantleverage.com and download unlock the 5 hidden LinkedIn strategies that top PR teams swear by.